Today we are joined by members of the St. Kitts and Nevis Bureau of Standards, the SKNBS. They are Jermaine Mike, Head of Standardization and Air Quality, Dr. Marcus Natta, Science and Research Manager, and I-ronn Audain, Head of Metrology. Welcome to Good Morning SKN, gentlemen.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Morning. Thank you.
All right, so before we talk about World Accreditation Day, very generally, I'd like you to paint a picture of exactly what the responsibility is for the Bureau of Standards. Who would like to take that?
I'll let him know.
Sure, I'll take it. So thank you so much again for giving St. Kitts and Nevis Bureau of Standards this forum to enlighten persons about our work, and especially on World Accreditation Day. So the St. Kitts and Nevis Bureau of Standards, I always find it very funny because our mandate says to protect human health and the environment. So that means everything, right? Okay. I mean, except animals, I suppose, and plants. So our mandate is quite broad, and we do quite a lot with, some limited resources. And today, as you mentioned, I have the head of metrology, the head of standards, and also air quality. Mr. Mike deals with air quality. We also have units that deal with chemistry, microbiology as well. And so, we do quite a bit at the Bureau of Standards.
I suppose it's a testament that you do quite a bit, and yet it seems like the public doesn't really know what you do because there's not a problem that you haven't been able to handle, and I guess that's a good thing. Oh, that. Do you want to take that?
No, it's just how you phrase it there. You're quite correct, sir. We have been able to solve our problems.
So, gentlemen, what exactly is accreditation?
Yeah, so accreditation is really formal recognition of an entity by a third party, which is normally known as an accreditation body. And that recognition is towards a particular internationally recognized standard. And so it gives that entity the assurance that what they say they're doing is of a high quality and gives the consumers like ourselves that trust that their tests, their processes, their service are reliable.
Okay. So does this accreditation apply to businesses? So persons that are applying to be licensed?
Okay. So in our context, we're speaking about laboratory accreditation. Of course, many persons have been to university, and your university is usually an accredited university, an accredited program. So there are varying types of accreditation, although similar in the sense that you are formally recognized by some independent body, so that your degree, for example, is accepted if you go to Australia right now to find a job. It's recognized once you did it at an accredited university. So likewise, in our field of work where we deal with laboratory testing and so on, we know that if we are accredited here, we are accredited globally. Right? So we always say in our business, accredited once, accepted everywhere. And that's what we try to do at the Bureau of Standards.
So I have a follow-up question. How does meteorology fall into the accreditation, since you said you were speaking about labs?
Sure.
Okay, well, first thing is not meteorology.
Okay.
Meteorology is weather, and is actually metrology.
Oh, metrology.
So, which is the science of measurement.
Okay.
So, accreditation is built on a few pillars, which include, not accreditation, the quality infrastructure.
Okay.
This is an infrastructure that ensures that goods and services meet or exceed a certain standard.
Oh, okay.
So, in order to have these pillars, you have accreditation as one of the pillar, conformity assessment, testing, and you have metrology.
Okay.
What metrology does is that it ensures that the instrumentations used to conduct measurements, whether it's in a chemical lab or it's somebody weighing at in a scale, that these equipment are precise, accurate, and reliable. So, in other words, it means that persons can have that confidence that if I get a test result, all the equipments have been calibrated. The reference material that they may use to conduct the test has also been calibrated, so that those test results are reliable, they're accurate, and they can have that assurance that they don't have to second guess the results, because they know it's been through a process, and metrology. And metrology again verifies that all these measurements are accurate and reliable.
Okay. So I mixed up the two.
Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification.
Which I'm sure you get quite a lot.
I had the same when I first went into metrology, I thought it was metrology. So
okay.
I was saying I got to get an umbrella and some work.
I love it. I love it.
Thankfully, you've learned the difference. All right, so let's talk, gentlemen, about the relevance of the theme. And I just had it and I lost it. All right, so you know what the theme is. Let's talk about the relevance of the theme. I'm seeing economic growth, sustainability, and so on. How does that parlay into what you do regularly?
Mr. Mike, you've been awfully quiet. We need to hear from you.
No, because I'm waiting because I know that standards is on the topic, but
Okay.
and I was letting the gentlemen speak for their respective areas.
All right.
You know what I mean? So that's why I'm quiet.
Okay.
But no, I will still pass it on to Dr. Natta.
After all that.
So the theme speaks to sustainability and economic growth and the environment. And we are members, and Mr. Mike will say shortly, I'm sure, that we are members of various standards bodies, in particular our CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, CROSQ, which is based in Barbados, and internationally as well, ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, along with other entities. And under this theme, this year, the focus is really helping us to achieve some of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which we are set to hopefully achieve, most of them by 2030.
Okay.
And in particular, things to do with climate change, land, energy, and so on. In particular, World Accreditation Day is trying to focus. So there are standards like ISO 14000, that family of standards deals specifically with environmental issues, energy efficiency, reducing climate change, reducing emission of greenhouse gases and so on. So that is how it ties in with standards and also how we could help the environment. In terms of economic growth, there are also standards that help, because when you use a standard, particularly in a business, what that does is help you to save time, save money, make your processes more optimized and more efficient. And of course, that would lead to, if you have lower costs, you should also have increased revenue. So that's where the economic growth can come in, and where standards can help as well.
So,
No,
yes.
I can come in.
Please do.
Our department has, when it comes to especially for the environment part, we have come in where we have contributed, where we have adopted a standard, the Energy Efficiency Building Code, where it just speaks to energy management. So for example, it may speak to what type of bulbs you may use to conserve electricity.
Okay.
We also have where there's 3 other energy efficiency standards that are slated on the books. That is compact bulbs, LED bulbs, and energy labeling for appliances.
Okay.
So for example, when you go into appliance store, TDC, Walmart, whatever, right? You would normally see a label on refrigerator or
the yellow
washing
label?
machine. Yes, the yellow label and so forth. So we're trying to enhance that labeling so that you know exactly what it is that you're buying. And as you can see, some of these labeling standards, they do labels on these appliances. They're written in different language. Sometimes you can't understand it, and this is where we come in.
Okay.
Right, where we're supposed to make sure. Right now, we're passing legislation to ensure that. Well, we're writing, not passing. We're writing legislation so that we ensure that in any good, whether that is food, appliances, or whatever the case may be, any good that enters into our country should have English on that label.
Good.
Right, so that people know what they're buying, they trust what they're buying, they know how to use it, they can fix it. All of this goes into the economic growth also, because if you know what you're doing, there can be businesses that can fix these things and so forth, right? So this is the part that we are also doing to drive.
So can you tell us some of the activities which will be undertaken on this day here in St. Kitts and internationally?
For World Accreditation?
Yes.
Got to pass it on to Dr. Natta. Because he's fundamentally in charge of accreditation.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So globally, World Accreditation Day is a joint initiative by the International Accreditation Forum and the International Laboratory Accreditation Corporation. So in particular this year, because the focus is on economic growth and the environment,
Yes.
you will find a lot of activities surrounding that, specifically surrounding the reduction of climate change, which is, of course, a major topic. For us here in St. Kitts and Nevis, your wonderful program forms part of our activities for the day. And, of course, we will also be putting out a video. It might be posted already while I'm speaking, a video that highlights our work at the Bureau of Standards in terms of accreditation. There's also a joint statement put out by those two entities I just mentioned that we will put into the media, share with newspapers, etc. as well.
All right, so we've gotten a glimpse of your respective roles. What I didn't hear about, which I'm curious about now since you referenced climate change, is the air quality in testing. What can you tell us about that, Mr. Mike? If you can.
Well, the air quality that we're able to perform, air quality is a broad umbrella term.
Okay.
Right? There are many things in the air, and I don't think there's one laboratory that can test for everything, right? But for our purposes in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have zeroed in on just three things, really, or three aspects of air quality, which is mold identification. We have also gases. Gases can be things like carbon dioxide, which we all know, nitrogen oxide, those kind of things and so forth. And then there's particulate matter, which is PM 2.5 and PM 10. Now you'll see me saying particulate matter 2.5 and 10 and those kind of things, right? But to describe it to the layman, as I always say, just picture a beam of light coming through a window and you see those particles that are swirling in those beams of light. Those are what are particulate matter. It can be dust, it can be even mold spores, it can be anything, fibers and so forth, right? Hair particles and that kind of thing. So if they get at particular level, they can affect respiratory functions. And so that is why we test for those.
Okay. So do you test before the... Okay, this question is going to be related to buildings. So do you test before the building is passed for occupants to go in, or do you test during if...
Right now we are reactive.
Okay.
So people, our entities, they would call the Bureau of Standards and they would request a test. So sometimes they don't know what they want. They'll come and ask us, they say, we need air quality, we don't feel good. Every time I come in the morning, I just don't feel well and so forth. Which there is also such a thing as sick building syndrome. But I will not.
What is that? I want to know. What is sick building syndrome? I want to know.
Sick building syndrome is you go into a building, you test for everything that you're capable of testing. You find nothing.
Nothing, okay.
But people still feel sick. Can't do anything about it.
Yeah, of course.
It's documented. It's real, right? But just saying that it's there.
I like
right?
that.
I think we know that. It's in very public ways indeed. I think we do know that.
It normally occurs in older buildings as well. So you find that for some reason people have had a tendency. Most of the time, because of the material that these older buildings are made of, they tend to break down, and detecting a particular cause, it does be difficult because it's more than one thing occurring at the same time.
So although it passed, something could still be occurring behind the scenes.
Yeah.
That's why I said that we can only test a few parameters.
Okay.
There may be others, like, as you said, where broken down, there may have been some material that we are not able to test for. But based on what we just can't find anything.
Okay.
Typically, buildings over 50 years, you find you have that sort of phenomenon happening. So you find and especially if it's poorly ventilated.
Okay.
And the materials that they used back in those days had things like lead and arsenic in them. They would use that in the paint and so forth. Because they didn't know any better at the time. So, but now we would find people just feeling sick.
So, Mr. Mike, have you ever recommended that they just tear the building down?
Of course, sometimes, well, I wouldn't, I'm not a structural engineer. I'm not a structural engineer. So I typically would say, well, these are the structural defects that I see.
Okay.
I would recommend that you consult someone in that field to determine whether you should remove the building or not.
I love the disclaimer. I love it.
Very political answer and so forth.
I love
Or diplomatic at best.
Yes.
All right, so let's talk now, because I want to give you the opportunity. As I'm listening to you, and I did say that it seems as though you're able to handle the challenges that you're faced with well, because we haven't really seen or heard anything that speaks to your inability to do so. But I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you might encounter and the ways that perhaps the public at large could be able to facilitate you performing your duties, if there are any.
Yes, there's many, especially when it comes to air quality. Well, I've spoken on air quality, but since I'm also the head of standardization, head of standards, when it comes to standard, for example, I just spoke about the labeling of goods and so forth. We have standards. We were trying to do one for food and so forth. It's very contentious, very contentious. You sometimes the lack of stakeholder engagement, people don't understand. Everybody thinks that they know how standards is supposed to operate, but when they actually go into it, it's very difficult to get stakeholder engagement, just to get to comment and so forth. It's very difficult for that. People can get, you can get on one end of the spectrum, you can get no representation or no comments. On the other end of the spectrum, people can become very irate and confrontational. Right? And you kind of have to keep your composure sometimes as best as you can. As best as you can. Right? So, and then when it comes to air quality, I'm sure everybody have heard all of the stories and the schools and so forth. Boy, that was a tough time for me. Right? That was a tough time for me. Your back had to be broad for all of the insults and so forth that you would have gotten and so forth. So some of these are the challenge, as well as getting proper equipment. So for example, we would like to help agro-processors when it comes to certify their products and that kind of thing, right? Because without that certification part, there is no true trade between us and other countries, right? So we need that that national certification for our agro-processors. And since we don't have the necessary funding for the equipment and so forth, we are unable to help. It kind of burns me to not be able to help the little man like that, but it is the reality at the moment. But I can let the others speak as well as the other.
Like what?
Well, in terms of metrologies, there's various. I think for metrology, for most part, we have got good cooperation with the public. When we initially started, for example, when we started with gas pumps, there were gas station owners that was a bit hesitant. But after we explained to them what we're doing and so forth, they became more relaxed. And you found that some of them was like, they're mindful of the government regulating them and so forth. And you would find that when we actually carry out the tests, they actually were giving away the gas. So then you find that there was a reversal where they would actually call us and say, so when you come in to help check the pumps and so forth and make sure they're overselling the gas and so forth.
So you're the one I have to blame for paying more at the pump or visiting more frequently.
We should also note that when it comes to metrology, we have for every skill, well, because it's legal metrology that he is doing. So if you go to any gas pump, even the airport scales, as well as the very supermarket balances and so forth, you should see a Bureau of Standards sticker on there, right? Yeah. So you can look for it. If it's not there, it's either been illegally removed, or it's not. The scale is not passed for trade purposes and so forth.
No, I know.
You can say something to
so
that.
the hanging scales that are in the supermarket?
No, those are not for sale, because where they actually do the selling is at the counter.
Okay, got it.
Or the weighing in the back. So those are just for you to get an idea of what you're buying.
Okay, so those electrical ones that we see, the flat ones.
Yeah, the scanners,
Okay.
Great. And Dr. Natta, sorry.
Just one last thing. We're also building a mass metrology lab. That's the activity that we have. That's going to carry our measurement capabilities to the next level. So our measurement capabilities we recognize internationally. Once the lab is completed, we would have participated in some test and study. St. as the smallest nation on the earth, would actually have our measurement capabilities registered internationally, so people could look and recognize and see what our measurement capabilities are.
That's great. Do you have any timelines for us on that?
So we're looking at next year November to have accreditation and then enter into the what they call the key comparison database.
Lovely.
That's
Great,
very
great accomplishment.
very accomplishment.
Yes.
So my colleagues did a good job in
Aw.
describing quite a few of the challenges. From an accreditation aspect, the St. Kitts and Nevis Bureau of Standards, we're working towards accreditation with Mr. Mike in terms of the toxic gases that he would have mentioned. And also in our chemistry lab, looking at pH analyses, we do quite a bit in that area because we, for example, test and analyze the water that the dialysis unit at the JNF General Hospital will use. That water has to have certain, requirements and specificities as well, and that's a big part of what we do. Again, protecting human health, right?
Yes.
And so while we are still on a bit of a journey towards accreditation, which is expensive, complex, and my colleagues can attest to the fact that it takes a lot of work.
Yes.
We are still adhering to internationally recognized standards. But we hope by the end of this year, early next year, to have that wonderful seal of approval that we have accredited our toxic gases analyses and our pH analyses. And as Mr. Audain said, later on next year, hopefully, to have accreditation in terms of mass, some of our mass measurements.